Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. We are going to take a journey this morning with someone that I know extremely well in Israel, a ministry called Ma'oz, which is personally very, very near and dear to my heart. Their founders, Ari and Shira Sorkoram. I have spent much time with them, both in the United States and in Israel. They are two of my favorite people. As a matter of fact, the first phone call that I received when I was making the transition from being a congregational leader into this ministry was from Ari Sorkoram with a word of encouragement and a blessing on my life. And so I will never forget the love that I received from them. But we're going to be joined this morning by Ted Vanlandegham, a Jewish believer in Jesus. Ted is the Director of Partner Relationships at Ma'oz Israel Ministries. Ted, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thanks, Rabbi. I'm glad to be here.
So good to see you. Prior to serving on staff with Ma'oz, Ted served on active duty in the United States Air Force for 25 years. He served in various capacities during his career in the Air Force, working at the Air Force Institute of Technology, the National Guard Bureau, and the Pentagon. In 2003, Ted was selected to work in the White House Communications Agency, where he led a $325 million communications upgrade project. He also deployed to serve on the staff of Headquarters 3rd Air Force in England, Headquarters U.S. Air Forces in Europe at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, and the 332nd Expeditionary Fighter Wing located at Balad Air Base in Iraq. Ted retired on June 1st, 2013 in Dallas, Texas. He currently resides in Fort Worth with his wife Tina, their 6 children, Amanda, Megan, Ashley, Sarah, Levi, and Joseph. For over 24 years since becoming a believer in Yeshua, Jewish believer in Yeshua, like myself, Ted has had a strong call to ministry. Before serving with Ma'oz, he served in numerous evangelistic outreaches, including prison ministry at Monday Correctional Facilities in Dayton, Ohio. Ted shares with passion and knowledge about the Jewish roots of the faith and the feast of the Lord. His story will inspire you, and he is currently serving as a Messianic pastor of a new congregation formed in Fort Worth, Texas. Great resume, Ted. How interesting that you would land after this career as Air Force serving in Jewish ministry.
Yeah.
What kind of, first of all, let's go back 24 years to coming to faith. Here you are, a Jewish man, and you're in the military.
Yep.
And what was your encounter? What was it that occurred that brought you to faith?
Well, you know, my parents had wanted me, my adoptive parents wanted me to go to Webster University in St. Louis to go into law, and I had no interest in that at all. And I had a pretty bad case of wanderlust. I wanted to see the world, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life yet. And so I went off and joined the Air Force without telling my folks, and I wasn't supposed to leave. I was on the delayed enlistment. I wasn't supposed to leave for a year and a half, and then my recruiter showed up at my work and said, "Hey, I got some good news and some bad news. The good news is we got the job you wanted. Bad news is you leave tomorrow morning at 4 in the morning." And so I went home and told my folks that I enlisted in the Air Force and I was leaving the next day. And one of my best friends I had grown up with, his name was Joe Conway. He had recently come to faith, and he came over and shared about how he had become a believer in Yeshua and Jesus, and spent the night at my house before I left, and just shared all night with me. I didn't receive the Lord at that moment, but the next morning I went to the MEPS in Processing Center in St. Louis, and a Gideon's man was there, and he gave me a Bible. It was actually my first Bible, and I hadn't ever read the Bible before, and so I was curious. And then I got down to basic training, and in the Air Force we have what we call a wingman concept. And so in basic training, you never go anywhere by yourself. You always have your wingman with you. And, you know, a lot of times your wingman, you're doing details, like our job was to scrub the the stairs of the barracks with toothbrushes. Well, my wingman, he would read the Bible to our entire flight every night, and then explain what that passage meant. And then I went to my technical training school in Keesler, Mississippi, and I got roomed up with another believer. And then finally, I got to my first duty assignment, and everybody at AFIT that I worked with at the Air Force Institute of Technology, in the section I was working in, they were all believers. And I began to feel like there was a conspiracy to make me a believer. And it wasn't until about a year later, on Halloween night of 1989, that I surrendered my life to the Lord.
How interesting. So God had orchestrated it from the moment that your friend came over to share with you, every possible step along the way, making it very clear
Absolutely.
that he was calling you. It was inescapable. It was a message that was a personal SOS for you. So, did you share with anybody about your coming to faith?
As soon as I became a believer, I immediately called my friend Joe and shared with him. He was super excited, and then took me a while to share with my parents. My parents were liberal Democrat activists, union folks, and didn't really have much use for faith. And so, but in that same season, the Lord began to reconnect me, to my Jewish roots. There was a lady in the church that I got saved in. Her name was Norma Merrick, and she was a laid-down lover of Israel and of Yeshua, and she was the first person who really began to activate that dormant part of my identity.
How interesting. You referred to your parents in a particular way. What did you call them?
My birth father was Stephen Zerd. He was a Jewish man. My mom was Elizabeth, but at age 5, I was adopted into the Vanlandegham family, and so raised in a Gentile secular home.
Okay.
Really had no consciousness of God or even my Jewish background. It wasn't a factor in my life until I became a believer.
That's very, very interesting. The comment was made about me, although I came to faith at 44, that I was now more Jewish than I had ever been. And I actually felt that. I felt that way. My family looks at me that way. When they want something, if they've got a question about something that's Jewish, they call me, which is quite interesting. I made my faith known early on. I was actually asked to preach my father's funeral, so I found a great deal of acceptance in it. A lot of consternation, but yet acceptance. There's probably more animus between me and my family over the fact that I'm a conservative Republican than it is of my statement of faith in the Jewish Messiah. So my mother actually called me. She's 90, be 91 in August, and called me the other day and said, "Look what you did to this country," as if I was personally responsible. I said, "Yes, I wield that kind of power. I set up presidents and kingdoms, and yes, Mom, I have finally arrived at what you thought I would amount to, is that this all-powerful, omniscient," she was offended because the first movie they watched in the White House was Finding Dory. How can you be offended by Dory? I don't understand. So that's the only tension that there is political, while she still lives in Pennsylvania. So you embraced your Jewish identity. Here you are, born into a Jewish family and adopted at 5 into a Gentile family, but more secular Gentile family. They were not active in the church. They weren't believers.
No, they didn't. They didn't know the Lord, and very secular, and there was a strong sense of family. They did a lot as a family with brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, and such. But no understanding of God, sense of God, faith, anything like that. And so when I came to faith, it was for me, it was a pretty radical shift in my life. And I don't think it was any coincidence that immediately God began to restore my Jewish heritage to me in the same process of bringing me to Messiah. But that wasn't an immediate. It began immediately, the reconnection, but for me, it really took a long time. It was a process of meeting people through my journey in ministry and in the military. God kept brushing me up against Jewish people and Jewish believers, and it really culminated when God brought me to my O's.
Well, I can imagine. You know the story of Ari and Shira being Shira Lindsay of the wonderful ministry of her father, and Ari, who was Jewish, who was in Hawaii 5-0, played for the St. Louis Cardinals, had a movie career, and meets Shira, gets radically changed, and they moved to Israel, and in the 70s, almost as the pioneers. And Ari and Shira Sorkaram are the founders of the ministry that Ted works for. So you decide you're going to retire from the military.
Yeah.
And you're 25 years in.
Yep.
So is that the magic number?
Well, no, I could have retired at 20, and I was getting ready to be promoted to E9 Chief Master Sergeant. That was my goal. That was the top rank for me as an enlisted man, and I had my sights set on that. And about a year after we got stationed here in Texas, we had my daughter had went over to Israel on a 6-month mission trip with some friends of ours who had made Aliyah, and after she had left, the Lord had planted us in a different congregation, beginning of our second year here, and immediately I really felt like the Lord spoke to me in a very tangible way. Our first service at that congregation, I felt like the Lord said, it's time to get out of the military, because Israel is your destiny. And for me, I felt like that was the first time I heard the Lord speak to me in a very definitive way. I didn't hear him audibly or anything like that, but like right. in my spirit. And so I told my wife, and my wife was like, and do go where? Are we going to go to Israel? How are we going to get there? And anyway, we prayed about it for 3 days, and after about 3 days, my wife came into alignment with me on that, and so I went into my commander and said, "Hey, Colonel, I'm going to decline the promotion," which in the Air Force, to get to Chief Master Sergeant, less than 1% of the total enlisted force ever makes it there. And so it was insane to walk away from that.
Right,
but I just really me to. And so and as soon as I submitted my separation paperwork, immediately what I would say were supernatural divine connections started to flow. We couldn't go to Kroger's or Walmart or Panera Bread or Starbucks without somebody coming up to us and saying, "Excuse me, are you Jewish? Do you speak Hebrew? I mean, who asks you, do you speak Hebrew?
Right.
Do you have anything to do with Israel?" And it was these divine connections, people who were really prompted by the Lord, that placed me in the path of connection with Ma'oz.
Well, how interesting. I mean, you could not be with a finer organization and a finer group of people. So you interviewed. Who all did you interview with? Well,
what we did is we'd sent I didn't even know if Ma'oz had any positions open, and I had went to a conference, and I briefly met Ari and some of the other staff at a conference that I had been invited to through one of these divine connections, and so somebody, and I hadn't thought about connecting with them, but somebody had come up to me about a week after I'd been at that conference. A lady, I was actually doing a Passover presentation at a home group in Mansfield, and a lady came up to me and she goes, "I know you don't know me, but I really feel like the Lord is telling me to tell you this. I feel like you're supposed to send your resume and your testimony to Mao's Israel Ministries because God has a position for you there. And we were really actively seeking what door that you want us to go through, Lord. And I had numerous offers with Lockheed Martin, with the Army, civil service position at Wright-Patterson that I could have taken.
Right. So you're living in Ohio now.
Well, I live in Texas, but I got offered a position in Ohio.
Okay.
And we had lived in Ohio prior to this. So anyway, this lady just comes out of the blue that we'd never met and says that, and so we prayed about it and sent a resume and a testimony in. And at that time, they were looking for somebody to fill the position that I'm in now. And so when we went to the time of the interview, we interviewed with Ray and Christy Wilkerson. And the interesting thing was Ray and Christy Wilkerson, it turns out that we discovered during our interview, because they asked us, how did you get this heart for Israel? And my wife led off talking about our friends, Chaim and Rudy Singerman, who now live in Israel. And we, Chaim and Rudy, Chaim especially, my wife had grown up with him, went to elementary, junior high, high school, and then Chaim had come to faith. And Chaim had led my wife to the Lord. Well, we found out that after he moved to Texas and was long distance witnessing to my wife, that Ray and Christy from Maoz had been discipling and mentoring them. And so here we are 27 years later, interviewing with people who were kind of indirectly responsible for my wife's salvation. And we found that out in the context of our interview. So we just felt we saw God's hand in this whole thing.
So really, from the moment of the night before you were to go into the military, to go into a life of service, God orchestrated every single step along the way that would bring you to not only salvation, but would also bring you to a restoration of your Jewish identity, your understanding of Scripture, calling you to raise your family under this covering of believing and marrying a believer, and now this heart for Israel, you looking at all kinds of other opportunities, but this is the one you felt was the divine appointment.
Absolutely.
So you get hired, and the role that you're in is as the U.S. representative for Maoz. For our viewers who don't know what Maoz is, it's M-A-O-Z, and in Hebrew it means?
Strength. Out of Psalm 27, the Lord is my strength, he is my Maoz. And it can mean fortress too.
Right.
But it primarily means strength.
You know, the song Ma'ozor, Rock of Ages. It's a firm foundation, a rock, a fortress, a strong place to operate. And Maoz Israel was formed in 1976, so it is one of the oldest established ministries in Israel, providing humanitarian aid, providing congregational life, printing and translation services, as well as helping to organize the groups of hundreds of Messianic congregations that have sprung up all over Israel in helping, as Ari has been a grandfather to so many of them, you have the opportunity to represent them in the States. So your job responsibilities, your role, what do you do? Where do you go? What do you do when you get there?
Well, sure. The first thing that I do is, really have two roles: director, partner relations. So I connect with those who are connected with the ministry. Pray with supporters. We just had one of our supporters. Her husband. They'd been supporting the ministry for over 20 years. Her husband just passed away, and so called and prayed with her and just listened. So there's kind of a pastoral element to it, but also as a spokesman too for the ministry. And I go to churches and Messianic congregations. I've been to schools, even a salon. I was invited to speak at a salon. shared about the restoration. And so, anyway, we share about the ministry of Ma'oz Israel Ministries. We talk about all that Ma'oz is doing in the land. Like you mentioned, some of those things, humanitarian. We started a humanitarian aid fund called I Stand with Israel, where we take care of persecuted Jewish and Arab believers. We help with Aliyah, with school, needs. We help widows and orphans, war victims, terrorism victims. We also translate Christian books and great books of faith from English into Hebrew. We're even doing a few Chinese house church.
How wonderful!
Sell those books into me.
How wonderful, Ray. We're losing your audio. Ray, we're losing your audio a little bit. I'm going to go to break, and when we come back from break, we're going to continue with Ted, with Ted Vanlandegham of IStandWithIsrael.com, MaOzIsrael.com, and when we return, we're going to find out about some of the projects they have going on, how you can book Ma'oz into your congregation, how to reach them, and when you are looking for an Israel ministry to support, they are fully vetted by both me personally and our ministry, and are one of the, right there at the very top of the list we support in Israel. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
I'm Angela Waite, and I just finished my interview on Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. I hope that in some way you will be touched by my story and that you will receive the healing you so desperately desire. I would like to share my story with you and send you a personalized signed copy of my book, Bomb Pops, Blow Dryers, and Butterfly Kisses, for your tax-deductible gift of $25 or more to Igniting a Nation, Inc. I will personally send you my book along with a note of encouragement as you take this journey with me. You will not only be supporting the work of Igniting a Nation, but all the proceeds that I receive from book sales goes to support Ramsey's Rescue, which targets the physical and spiritual care of the little ones who have been abandoned. It is the goal of this ministry to provide food, clothing, education, medical, a safe and loving home, and hope. Please help support both ministries with your gift and make a difference in so many lives today. Send your check payable to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama 35242. May the Lord bless you for your generosity and support.
This is the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of Revealing the Truth, right here on the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network, inviting you to join me every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday for our Prophecy in the News classes. Each week I take the headlines from around the world that have a biblical connection and present them in a way that brings the news and the Bible to life. There are over 2,500 prophecies in the Bible, and there are so few classes available to see how they connect with world events. We cover everything from Islamic terrorism to the changing relationships between Russia, Turkey, Iran, Syria, and Israel. Prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes, and to many, it is complicated and hard to understand. In just 1 hour each week, you'll be given the tools and the biblical connection to world events. With so much going on, and so few reliable sources of news, I encourage you to join me every Monday night at 7 o'clock p.m. at St. Mark United Methodist Church in Northport, every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at Beechwood Baptist Church in Mount Olive, and every Thursday night at 7 p.m. at Mountain Chapel United Methodist Church in Vestavia. If you want to make sense out of what's happened in the world around you, this is the class for you. All are welcome. Times and location addresses can be found on our website at ianbn.com. I hope to see you there. Shalom. This is Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation Ministries, and your host for Revealing the Truth right here on the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network. I'm coming to you today with a very special offer from one of our very prominent guests, Dr. Carl Gallups. For your tax-deductible contribution of $30 or more, Pastor Carl Gallups will send you a signed copy of his new best-selling book, When the Lion Roars. In this book, you will discover what the Bible really says about the unprecedented demonic outpouring of the last days. the spirit of the days of Noah, the connection of technology and prophecy fulfillment, the spirit of Sodom and Gomorrah, apostasy in the last days church, why Turkey is central to last days prophecy, why Israel is the centerpiece of end-time prophecy, the historical truth about Islam and ISIS, the Shemitah, the mystery of 666, and how Christians in the church should respond to these prophetic times. We are living in intense but exciting times. We're living in prophetically unprecedented times. Be on guard, prepare your heart and mind, make certain you have a biblical balanced understanding of our generation. Be ready with wisdom and perspective. We have been raised up for such a time as this. The lion of God's prophetic word is roaring. Do you hear its call? Send your check payable to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242.
Hi, I'm Angela Waite, and I just finished my interview on Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. I hope that in some way you will be touched by my story and that you will receive the healing you so desperately desire. I would like to share my story with you and send you a personalized signed copy of my book, Bomb Pops, Blow Dryers, and Butterfly Kisses, for your tax-deductible gift of $25 or more to Igniting a Nation, Inc. I will personally send you my book along with a note of encouragement as you take this journey with me. You will not only be supporting the work of Igniting a Nation, but all the proceeds that I receive from book sales goes to support Ramsey's Rescue, which targets the physical and spiritual care of the little ones who have been abandoned. It is the goal of this ministry to provide food, clothing, education, medical, a safe and loving home, and hope. Please help support both ministries with your gift and make a difference in so many lives today. Send your check payable to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. May the Lord bless you for your generosity and support.
This is the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of Revealing the Truth, right here on the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network, inviting you to join me every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday for our Prophecy in the News classes. Each week I take the headlines from around the world that have a biblical connection and present them in a way that brings the news and the Bible to life. There are over 2,500 prophecies in the Bible, and there are so few classes available to see how they connect with world events. We cover everything from Islamic terrorism to the changing relationships between Russia, Turkey, Iran, Syria, and Israel. Prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes, and to many, it is complicated and hard to understand. In just 1 hour each week, you'll be given the tools and the biblical connection to world events. With so much going on, and so few reliable sources of news, I encourage you to join me every Monday night at 7 o'clock p.m. at St. Mark United Methodist Church in Northport, every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at Beechwood Baptist Church in Mount Olive, and every Thursday night at 7 p.m. at Mountain Chapel United Methodist Church in Vestavia. If you want to make sense out of what's happened in the world around you, this is the class for you. All are welcome. Times and location addresses can be found on our website at ianbn.com. I hope to see you there. Shalom. Shalom and welcome back to Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Ted Vanlandegham from Ma'oz, Israel. Now, Ted has a very unique background in the fact that he was there in the White House. He's very familiar with what goes on in Washington. And Ted, the decision to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, you and I certainly applaud, but what's some of the little background on that you might be able to share with us?
Well, some number of years ago, our Congress actually passed a law requiring that the embassy be moved to Jerusalem, which really isn't, we already have a consulate there. I mean, really, it's just a matter of switching nameplates on a door. But there's been tremendous resistance to do that, and it's the onus has been on our past presidents to do this, and there's been promises and commitments to do that, follow through, and move the embassy and recognize that Jerusalem is the capital of the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, and it's never been the capital of any other people.
Right.
And so President Trump has made a firm commitment, and I'm hopeful and believing, especially from what I've heard at recent events that I've been with people who've worked and are working closely with the Trump administration, that they are in fact going to do it. There's been a few news articles talking about how they're already doing site surveys and looking at how they're going to implement this and do it and get it done. And so, on the opposite end of it, in the Muslim world, there's been some recent articles talking about how some of the Shiite leaders in Iraq would consider that an act of war on Islam.
Right.
But really, it's a spiritual battle.
Well, it is. When the Jerusalem Embassy Act was passed in 1995, it had a mandate that the embassy be moved and built in Jerusalem by 1999, unless the president at the time signed a 6-month waiver. So Bush, Clinton, Obama all signed waivers, and really all Donald Trump had to do was, it didn't even have to be an announcement. It didn't even have to be an exerted effort. All he had to do was not sign the waiver, and the law would be enforced. And so I think there's a great deal of confusion about what's going on and what the intentions are. You've been to Israel?
Yes.
Okay. Then when you're driving down Jerusalem, you see a fenced area that's an open lot, a vacant lot, and that is the place that had already been purchased. Now, on the back side of that lot, I believe that there is a nursing home or an old age home that they've rented out to make the land usable while it was in that stalled phase, and that lease is up, I believe, on that property in 2019. So that's one of the reasons why they're looking for a location when they already have a location, so they may work out a deal to sell what they have and buy an additional piece of property. This idea of anti-Jewish or anti-Israel sentiment comes from a part of the Christian world which is so baffling to me, that they love the Jewish Messiah, but they don't love the Jewish people, or they love the Jewish Messiah, or they don't love Israel. And quite honestly, you cannot love the Jewish Messiah and not love his people. And God says clearly in Leviticus 25 that the land belongs to the Lord. It does not belong to Israel, it belongs to the Lord. And as the living Father, he may designate whoever he so desires. As you, as a father, can designate to your daughter Amanda or my daughter Amanda, I can give to them what I so choose. It is not a matter of inheritance or a will. It is a matter of the will of the Father. And God will have compassion on who he has compassion. He will have mercy on who he has mercy. And they have to understand that Jesus is not returning to Conshohocken or to Fort Worth. He's coming back to Jerusalem, and that will be the millennial reign. So it's either going to be now or then, but it's going to happen. And that victory belongs to God and his ordained plan for the salvation of Israel. Maoz is involved in this, both in Israel and in Texas, where you are. You just were at an event last night where you heard some very strong commitments and some great support against the boycott, divest, and sanction movement, which is cropping up on our universities, which the churches, Presbyterian Church USA has embraced as they've removed Israel and the Jews from prayers, and have launched a boycott, divest, and sanction initiative. What was the news you heard last night?
So we had a North Texas rally for Israel in a local church, and we had political leaders, faith leaders, both from the Christian, the Messianic, and the mainline Jewish community there. And one of the things that we found out is that Texas is next week. They're going to have a rally on February 9th in Austin. One of the state legislators here, they have a bill, and Governor Abbott of Texas has expressed his commitment that he will indeed sign this bill. And basically, the state of Texas will stop doing business with any company or organization that boycotts, divests, or sanctions Israel. In effect, if they boycott Israel, we'll boycott them as a state.
Praise God.
And Texas is the 10th largest economy in the world, surpassing most nations. And you're talking about over 200 billion annual. I think it's close to 270 billion dollars annual revenue, GDP, just for the state. And so, anyway, it's quite an amazing move. There's 17 other states that are in some phase or form or process of doing the same thing, and so there's a real pushback against this effort to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. And like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of Christian denominations and organizations that have been behind this, and at the root of that is replacement theology.
Yes.
And that's what I have found. And one of the things that I think we've kind of taken for granted, in the church, and even in the evangelical church, is the understanding of why Israel matters. And we have to be intentional to pass that baton and communicate why Israel matters and should matter. And there's numerous reasons from the scripture that God's a covenant-keeping God. The covenants. We have an indebtedness, as in the church, as the church has an indebtedness, really the world to the Jewish people for preserving and passing down the foundations of our faith, and also the promise of blessing, that I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Genesis
12:3. That's exactly right. It's interesting that the land covenant that God made in Genesis 15 with Abraham was not conditional. The enjoyment of the land was conditional, as Moses conveyed the message of God in Deuteronomy, that it was conditional upon our behavior. That was the enjoyment of the land. But God says he's bringing us back. And these prophecies that are being fulfilled show very clearly that Israel was and is to come the truly the land that God has chosen to assemble the nations of the world there, first in an attack against Israel, but then to bring them in belief. And this presumption that the Jewish people's rejection of Jesus brought about a transfer of a covenant relationship to the church is the hijacking of the Jewish Messiah. You can't read the book of Hebrews where it says he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, that he was a Jew, he is a Jew, he's returning as a Jew, and deny the fact that it will be in Jerusalem. And God says in the book of Joel, never again will my people be divided. Never again will the land be divided. And so if you are believing in that, then quite honestly, and for all those viewers that embrace this concept that the church has replaced Israel, I want you to understand the parable of the sheep and the goats. You are a goat. It is not that you don't believe in Jesus, you are a goat. You are a goat in the sheep and goat parable. You are a goat in the fact that whatever you do to the least of his brothers and sisters, you do to him. We, the Jewish people, are his brothers and sisters. There was no New Testament at the time of him speaking those words. There was no construct for a Gentile church. There was no thought of a Gentile church. His brothers and sisters were those who were his people. He clearly said 2 times, he said to the disciples, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Do not go to the Gentiles. He said to the woman, I did not come for you. I came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Paul himself writes in the New Testament, in Romans chapter 1, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of God for salvation to all who believe, to the Jew first. This is God's economy, and man cannot alter. The instructions of the Bible are clear. Do not add to or take away from the letter of this law. And these were covenant relationships. And so this covenant relationship with Israel is irrevocable. If God could change his covenant with Israel, why don't you think he can change his covenant with you? If you rest on John 3:16 as a covenant relationship of your belief in the Messiah, could God just change his mind and say, oh, just kidding, you didn't do what I wanted you to do? If you have accepted Jesus, you did exactly what he wanted you to do. And so God is not a covenant-breaking God, and man cannot usurp God's authority. And we see in the natural disasters and calamities that he metes out his justice in the natural.
Absolutely. One of the things that is great is these legislations that are coming down the pike and laws, and political moves. That's great, and it's great to come at this BDS movement on that plane. But the real battle, I believe, against BDS and really against Israel is to bring this understanding of God's plan for Israel and why Israel matters and why Israel should matter. That we need to be intentional in communicating that. And so that's why, whenever I speak for Ma'oz, I talk about all the things that we're doing: humanitarian aid, translating great books, outreaches, leadership conferences, youth conferences. But underpinning all of that is we need to communicate this mission that we're doing is important, and here's why. Here's why Israel matters. And, a really prime example, Don Finto wrote a great book.
He was with us last week.
Yeah, Your People Shall Be My People.
Yes.
And one of the things, he points out, and I've been doing some research on this, the one nation that never turned the Jewish people away historically, there's one nation. And I ask this in the congregations I go to, and they all almost exclusively say the United States. No, it was China. And during the Holocaust, by the end of World War II, the Chinese had taken between 80 and 100,000 Jewish people in. Shanghai alone, somewhere between 18 and 23,000. And they didn't turn any away. At the end of the war, as Israel was being birthed again as a nation, there were 1 million Christians in China. From 1948 to 1998, the church in China grew 8,000%. Youth with the Mission and the Center for World Missions in Pasadena, California, estimate that somewhere between 12 and 1,400 Chinese people are coming to faith in Yeshua and Jesus per hour. That's over 10 million new believers, sustained revival year in, year out. And there was even an article that suggested that the Chinese church may now be closing in a few years on 247 million. So in one generation, 1 million to 247 million. And is it a coincidence that the one nation that blessed Israel during their darkest hour is enjoying the greatest revival that we've ever seen, really, since the...
And there's a thriving community in Kaifeng, China, of entire Jewish city in Kaifeng, China. It is extraordinary that what God is doing. And now tell me, I want our audience to know how to reach you, what you do when you come to visit their congregations, what the purpose is, what you hope to accomplish, and what kind of real results have you started to see with pastors and congregations beginning to embrace the Jewishness of Jesus?
Well, sure. So what I do when I come and speak at churches, I come and I share about the ministry of Ma'oz, our humanitarian aid, our translation ministry, congregations that we support, leadership conferences, youth conferences, and many, many more ministries. And then I give that Why Israel message. But they can reach me by going to our website, www.maozisrael.org, or www.istandwithisrael.com, or they can email me, ted@maozisrael.org.
Wonderful.
And I encourage people to go to our website. They can sign up and get our newsletter, the Maoz Israel Report. It comes out monthly. It's free. And this month's issue, the February, talks about settlements, the truth and not the fiction. John Kerry was and our ambassador to the UN in December was talking about Israel and settlement activity and how that's an obstacle to peace. And John Kerry even made the statement that Israel has 70,000 settlements, which is, not even remotely true, because he counts each home that they build as a settlement. And then we have there's a great book that Shira just did that every member of the Congress, we were requested to send this to Congress, and it's called The Islamic Strategy to Conquer America. And so if they reach out and contact us, we'll be happy to send, either the book or the newsletter.
Tremendous resources, tremendous congregation growth, Tiferet Yeshua, If you like the work of Ron Cantor, who has written a number of books, Ron is part of Ma'oz and part of Tiferet
Yes.
Yeshua. If you know of Kobe and Shani Ferguson, Shani is Aryan Shira's daughter, and they too are a ministry in Israel. Kobe is from Birmingham, so he makes it to
Yep.
town quite often. It is a wonderful ministry of tremendous growth, who have embraced both their Arab, their Ethiopian, and their Russian brothers and sisters. They have probably the finest youth group of any congregation that I know of in the world. Amazing music coming out of it, and they have music centers and support music development and offer lessons. It is a tremendous outreach, a tremendous facility. They hand out millions upon millions of dollars in aid every single year. If you go up to Ma'oz Israel, you can look at their financial statement, their operating report. You can see that their costs are extremely small, especially compared to most 501c3 ministries in the United States. And I strongly recommend that your congregation reaches out, that you go to your pastor, that you get on the mailing list for maozisrael.org or istandwithisrael.com, and embrace what they're doing here in the United States, what they're doing in the land of Israel, supporting defense for persecuted Jews and persecuted believers in Israel. The scope of their services is remarkable. They have stood for 41 years in the land of Israel through every form of persecution, every form of loneliness, to pioneer and to go to a land where there were not believers. And they have helped build a foundation and helped start so many different congregations. And they are visionaries, they are friends, they are family to me. And I wanted our audience to get a chance to meet Ted, to hear about the story of Ma'oz, to hear his story, for you to be able to say, I've heard the story, I know somebody who works there, I've met Ted Vanlandegham, and I would like to get him to our congregation. And you are planning a trip to the South, so if you're in the southern states, but we of course are worldwide and not limited by geography, but we do have a good following here in the Birmingham area. So if you're interested in hearing the story of Israel and you wonder, which many do, am I giving to the right ministry in Israel? I can personally tell you the wrong ministries to support in Israel, but I'd rather tell you the right one. And Ma'oz Israel is one of a number that I can recommend 100%, personally vetted by me, knowing Aryan Shira Circarum for the last 21 years of my life, that they are a tremendous blessing, and you will be blessed by supporting that work in Israel. We will meet with them in Israel when we come in June, and Jason and I will be there to video the entire trip and to document our journey. Ted, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program. So great. Hopefully we'll be able to see you, get you in studio, and spend some one-on-one time with you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord turn his countenance toward you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you and give you his peace, in the name of Yeshua, B'Shem Yeshua Meshkino, in the name of our Messiah, Yeshua. Amen and amen. Be blessed, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Blessings.
Shalom.
Rabbi Walker, it was an honor.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Shalom. All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We'll be right back.